Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hannah McKennis, your moderator for today. On behalf of the TAMFT Education Committee, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Now let's welcome our presenter, Dr. Sara Blakeslee Salkil, who will share her presentation about the MFT licensure exam prep. Dr. Sara Blakeslee Salkil is the program director of the online Masters in Marriage and Family Therapy program and the assistant dean of graduate studies at ACU Dallas. In addition to her academic work, she is an appointed member of the Counselor, Social Worker, and Marriage and Family Therapy Licensing Board in Ohio. She also practices part-time and specializes in couples therapy. There will be a short time after the presentation for questions, so if everyone would please put their questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and not in the general chat at the bottom, so I don't lose track of them and that we can get them answered for you. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Blakeslee Salkil.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Okay, are we good to go, Hannah, on that? Okay, fantastic. So I'm so glad that you're here today. And as we're probably all way too familiar with this over the last couple of years, but in a webinar, you're all there and you can see me. I can't see anybody. I can see Hannah and that's it. So I'm going to trust that you're out there and that you're tracking along. And Hannah, I'm going to look to Hannah for my cues. So she's going to help me watch the time. She's going to raise pertinent questions, and then she's going to help me draw it to a close when we get close. Hannah, I'm going to watch too, but you don't hesitate to interrupt me there.
Absolutely. So
we are going to get started, and I'm going to just again welcome you to this 1-hour webinar on the exam prep information. And I want to back up and let you know that I am not the only one that has participated in developing this material. My co-developer, Dr. Jaime Goff, who is not with us today, she and I developed this material. Actually, we did it for TAMFT. We always lose track. It might have been 2008. We've been doing it for quite a long time. So we've been able to refine our work, and we hear really good things anecdotally from our participants over the years. So I'm hopeful that this is going to be a beneficial time for you today. Hannah gave my bio, and I think everything's fantastic. There's nothing else to say. I will note that I have now rolled off of my service to the Ohio Licensing Board, and we all know, we have to correct our credentials and make sure. So I just wanted to let everyone know I was a member for 6 years, and then my term rolled off, and so now I'm no longer a member. Just wanted to correct that one piece. So, okay, let's jump in. And I want to start with this question. What content area do you feel most confident and least confident in as you prepare for the AMFTRB exam? And I would encourage you, Hannah, do we want that in the chat or do we want that in the Q&A?
Go ahead and put it in the Q&A so that way we can keep track of it.
Okay, great. And Hannah, will you read off a few as they come in?
I sure will.
Thanks. So just take a minute and drop those. Drop your confidence sections and your least confidence sections.
So far, just waiting for people to answer.
It could you could also say I'm a little concerned about most of them. That would be okay too.
Absolutely. Extremely fair. I am not seeing any open questions yet, Dr. Okay, diagnosis is the first one.
Okay, great.
I'm seeing least confident is the application of theory in diagnosis.
Okay. I'm going to make some notes as we're going here.
Absolutely. Another one for diagnosis as well.
Okay.
And someone is also nervous about all areas.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. That's yes. Totally legitimate.
Yes.
Okay. Any more?
We have a comment about a huge lack of understanding of what's expected for us to know.
Okay.
This person's program is very LPC heavy, so she's open to learning everything that we need to know.
Understood. Okay, good deal.
One model in particular is the strategic model application.
Okay.
Question on that. Concerned about test taking strategies and studying strategies.
Okay. Ding, ding, ding. We're gonna touch on that specifically. So we're good to go. Let me jump in. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for that, Hannah. And thank you for responding. I appreciate that. I think we will cover, at least conceptually, we'll cover most of the comments that came through. And I've made a couple of notes here so that I can jog my memory when we get to these particular places. So, okay. First of all, let's just get oriented to the lay of the land when it comes to the exam. So the AMFTRB has 6 exam domains. These are listed here. You can read through them. And I want to tell you that on the AMFTRB website, so amftrb.org, in case you have not been there, that would be a great place to go either while I'm talking or, right after this is over, if you have time to kind of debrief, go to the website. There is a candidate handbook. And in that candidate handbook lists these domains and then several pieces of explanation under each one of them. So these domains are what the creators of the exam questions think you should be able to know in your early practice as an MFT. I want to throw a little caveat out here that I recognize not all of you may be in Texas. In fact, I actually live in Ohio and am licensed in Ohio and Texas. So we may be all over the place here, but I do want to let you know, not every state permits people to take the test, right at the end of their master's program or just as they're starting. Some states actually say, no, get your hours first and then test. So it is possible that you're going to come to this test with a little bit more practical knowledge than maybe your buddy over here who's in another state who took it, that last semester or last term of graduate school. So nevertheless, these are the 6 domains. And here are the specifics. And we're going to talk more about the domains in just a second. There are 180 items on the exam. This is a change from a couple of years ago where the exam was 200 questions. So you have 180 items and you have 4 hours to take the exam. And this divides out to 80 seconds per item. Now, try to hold your anxieties and your nerves at bay. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but I am wanting to let you know realistically, this is how long, if you spent the exact same amount of time on each question, this is how long you would have. Now, you're not going to spend 80 seconds on every question because some questions you're going to read and think, boom, I know it. You're going to answer it, you're going to feel confident, and you're going to move right along. And that's fantastic. And what have you used? 6 seconds. So now you've got a lot of extra time that you could save really digesting and thinking about, oh, I'm really struggling on this one. What is it? Just can't think of it. I'm torn between these 2 answers. So the time is going to even out, but I did want to let you know and break it down 80 seconds per item. Now let's talk more about the domains. I am listing here as we're walking through the approximate number of questions that you will see under each domain and the approximate percentage of the test that is devoted to questions in this domain. So I want to draw your attention first, the practice of systemic therapy. I want you to see that almost a quarter of the exam is about the practice of systemic therapy. And you're going to look, and that's going to be approximately 42 questions. And I say approximately because if you look in the candidate handbook, there are a range of percentages in a couple of different places. And this was accurate as of about a month ago. So maybe they've tightened that up a little bit, but that's why I've put the range here, because the candidate's handbook says 23 in one place, it says 24 in another. So we've got ourselves covered. So let's move on. Assessing, hypothesizing, and diagnosing, 13 to 15%, approximately 25 questions. Designing and conducting treatment, here's a kind of a wide range, 12 to 24%. So maybe almost a quarter of the exam, maybe not that quite that much for designing and conducting treatment. Evaluating ongoing process and terminating treatment, 12 to 17%. Crisis situations, arguably the smallest percentage, 10 to 14, approximately 26 questions here. And then finally, maintaining ethical, legal, and professional standards, 14 to 18%, approximately 34 questions. So here's one way right out of the gates that you can begin your study plan. If you know through your performance in your program, through exams, through your own studying, if you know, I know everything there is to know about treating crisis, I know everything there is to know about the code of ethics, I feel strong, I know all the standards, I've got them memorized, great. Then you already know, okay, I probably don't need to devote as much time to those two areas. And that's great. And you should lean into that and feel confident about the things that you do know. And then sort of put that to the, I'm not saying don't review the code of ethics, but maybe you put that, down to the side. And maybe that's something that you're kind of skimming, but you're not devoting, that concerted amount of time. I want to let you know, there's no way on the exam that that the domain will be denoted anywhere. So don't spend any brain power thinking, oh, what domain does this question fall in? Because I've already had 41 practice of systemic therapy questions. Is this my last one? No. Don't even think about that. I'm showing you the breakdown and I'm setting up the framework of the exam so that you'll know what the exam developers are expecting you to know and kind of the categories that they're expecting you to know. Okay, I'm going to move on, but I am going to drop that amftrb.org right at the bottom of this slide. And again, I recommend, if you haven't been there, knowledge is power. Don't be afraid. Get in there, do a little driving with your fingers, walk around the website, get familiar. Even if you're not planning to take the exam for a while, that's okay. Get in and demystify and debunk anything you've heard about the exam. Look at it for yourself and start getting familiar with it. Okay, a note about scoring. And this is from the AMFTRB. This is a quote from there. I think it's either the website or the handbook. Each year, there are 4 different forms of the exam. Each form is scored and statistically equated so that all 4 forms are of equal difficulty. This may result in the change in the number of items that a candidate must answer correctly in order to achieve a passing score. This is how the consistency and difficulty is maintained across all forms. So when we all finish taking the exam, we sign off that we will abide by the code of ethics and that we won't share the contents of the exam with our fellow colleagues, that I won't share them with you. And we do that. And so it's going to be really hard to compare and contrast, with your colleagues or your cohort members. Hey, which form did you get? You're probably not going to know, and that's okay. It's good enough to know that depending on when you test and whatever window you test in, you're going to have a different set of questions. The difficulty is going to be varied. It's also important to know that the test doesn't start easy and get hard, and it doesn't start hard and get easy. There are going to be a different level of difficulty questions sprinkled throughout. So this is why it's really important that you work through all of the exam, because there might be a question for you that is really simple and easy, and it might be the question number 180, and you don't want to miss getting those points at the end. Another note about scoring, and I'm going to say this now because I can't remember if it's later or not. The number of what you're scored on. So it doesn't hurt to make a guess on the exam. You want to answer every question. And if you don't know, you want to make a guess, because the score is based on the amount of correct items that you answer. Okay, so let's move into the types of questions that you are going to see on the exam. And there are 3 types of questions. The first are knowledge questions. These questions will ask you to recall and recognize terminology or relevant facts. This, I don't want to distill it down and say it's a vocab question, but think of it in that way. It's going to consist of a relatively brief stem. That's the part of the question. It's separate from the answers. And again, asking you to recall a piece of knowledge. The next type of question, application questions. This involves the use of knowledge in a new situation. These questions will ask you to apply, determine, solve, or plan. And the stem of this question usually includes a statement of knowledge followed by a problem to solve. This is a type of question where you are likely to see a brief clinical vignette, a couple of 2 to 3 to 5 sentences long, setting up a case. You know the key players, you know the family that's involved, the family members that are involved. And then you are going to be asked maybe something about what would you do next in treatment? What would you do first in treatment? What should you assess for in this particular situation? If you were using a structural lens, what intervention might be, et cetera, et cetera. So let me point out here in this example that if in the stem of that question, it reads, from a structural perspective, okay, I'm going to suggest to you right there that there's some baked in knowledge. And that's the first part of this, involves the use of knowledge in a new situation. So if the question is about being a structural therapist and applying that lens, you're automatically coming up with some things that you know about structural therapy. You know about the family life cycle and how those developmental stages can be difficult for families to navigate. We're thinking about the transactional plane and how there might be coalitions and alliances. We're thinking about the use of a structural map in terms of assessment and treatment planning. We think about some interventions. We think about mimesis, accommodation. We think about unbalancing. So just with that phrase, from a structural lens or as a structural therapist, some knowledge bubbles up, right? And then you're prepared to keep reading and then to look at the possible answers. The next type of question, analysis questions. These will ask you to break down a concept into a relationship among its parts or combine various elements of knowledge into a unified whole. These questions will ask you to compare, analyze, relate, formulate, or plan. This is another type of question where you might have a case vignette or some case material, and you will be asked to evaluate or interpret this scenario according to some knowledge that is given to you. And the knowledge might be, there's intimate partner violence, or there's domestic terrorism in this family. Okay, red flags are going off. Let me think ethics, let me think safety, let me think legal. So knowledge doesn't have to be, a genogram is useful for mapping the multi-generational path. That's all well and good and really straightforward, but it might not be that straightforward. So those are the 3 types of questions that you will expect to see on the exam. Next, let's move into some strategies for responding to the questions. Okay, and pardon me for, I don't mean to talk down to you, and I don't want to take this for granted, but I really do want you to carefully read the question. That might seem kind of an eye roll thing, like, of course I will, but really carefully read it. And here's why. You want to figure out what's the test question really asking? What are the keywords? What am I supposed to be honing in on here? Additionally, you will want to cover the options when you first read the STEM and answer the question in your mind. So cover those up. You'll be on the computer screen, right? So you could kind of hold your hand up and cover. Just read the STEM. Think through, what would I do? What would I do next? What would I do first? What is a unique outcome? Let me think of my vocab. Who is associated with narrative therapy? It was Michael White. You're covering and thinking on your own. And then once you come up with something that you feel pretty good about, you remove your hand and you see which is the option that is closest to what my answer was. And if that looks good to you, that's the one you're going to choose. So it is a helpful way for you to eliminate, and might not work for every single question, but it is a particular strategy that you might want to employ. Next, you would consider answering each answer option as a true false question and delete it if it's false. And this is, I find this helpful if if you're struggling to relate the answers as options to the STEM. If you're just really confused, this is the hard one, or, oh, we're covering a theory that we really didn't cover in my program and I'm not as familiar, and I did study, but I'm not able to come up with it. Maybe do a true false, and that might help you at least narrow it down from 4 choices, to 2 or 3 choices. Also, you would want to work through the entire test quickly, answering what's easiest for you first and marking those that you skip. You can come back later on the interface of the computer. There's a way to kind of flag or mark the ones that either you skipped or that you have answered but want to come back to as well. After you've worked through the exam, then you can go back to that list and you can look at the ones that you were uncertain about or that you needed a little bit of extra time on. And this will, as I said, this will prevent you from missing some questions at the end that may be really easy for you. I also want to note that I experienced this myself, and I've heard it from several people that have attended our workshops over the years. Sometimes there are answers later in the test. Something will jog a memory, or there'll be a word or an intervention, and it will cue something in your mind. And when you go back, oh, I remember that's, question 20. Now I've got that. So you don't really know how your mind is going to play off and help you answer something, earlier that you were uncertain about. I mentioned this, read all the stems and the options carefully. And this is why you want to take note of words like no, not, none, except, always, and never, that terminal language that we've all been trained not to use in therapy, and here it shows up on the exam. So that's why I emphasize really reading carefully. And even though you're working quickly, to read it slowly. This is tricky. This is where the exam gets a little bit tricky, is when we have that everything except, and if we miss that except, then we're gonna choose the wrong answer probably. This is another area where it gets tricky. You're gonna want to choose the best answer, and there may be a couple of correct things that you would do, but there's going to be a best or a better thing to do, and that's what you want to choose. I will mention this now, and I'll mention it again in a slide or two. So if you had a vignette and there is, let's say that someone has expressed suicidal ideation in the family. And let's say that in the vignette, the therapist is working from a solution-focused brief therapy approach. And one of the answers is and maybe the question ends with, what would you do first? And one of the answers is begin a process of goaling, or, start goaling with the family. That's great. Like all of us, that know SFBT, yes, that's an early thing, pre-session change. Let's talk about what they've already experienced as change. But then another answer is something about, assessing for suicidal ideation, making a safety plan. In that instance, the likely best answer is anything that involves a high-risk behavior, anything that involves an ethical or legal responsibility that you have. So while it is correct that one of the first things you would do in SFBT is you would engage in the goaling process, the best answer is that you would address the ethical and legal issue that's presented in the case. Okay. You should also become familiar with specific nuances of concepts from different theories that are similar in definition. The example here is exceptions in SFBT and unique outcomes in narrative therapy. So you may have a question where maybe in the STEM, we talk about Michael White. What intervention would he use in the following scenario? And you would have to know, oh, Michael White, narrative. Now, which one is it? Is it exceptions? Is it unique outcomes? And you would need to know theorist to theory to intervention. And you would want to be able to distinguish between the two of them and recognize, oh, DeShazer, Insoo Kim Berg, Yvonne Dolan, all of those people, that's the exception. You want to get those correct in your mind. And from your work in your program that there are a lot of concepts that overlap and that are used in multiple theories. For example, emotionally focused couples therapy makes use of an enactment. That's something that Sue Johnson and colleagues, they drew from Mnuchin. And so we also see enactments happening in structural family therapy. So you would want to recognize that sometimes those interventions are used in multiple places, multiple theories. Again, eliminate any options that you know to be wrong first. Don't spend any brain power on them. You've looked at the 4 answers. You know what you're up against. You know A is completely, there's no way it can be right. Don't second guess yourself. Don't try to make it fit. If you have a sense this is not right, then just don't pay attention to it. Focus on B, C, and D. I mentioned this already. Take your chances by guessing if you're unable to decide on the best answer. There's not a penalty if you get something wrong. Remember, we're working on the number of questions that you get right. You can mark your questions, again, if you're unsure, so you can return to them later if you have time. And again, you're gonna bank up a lot of those 80 seconds. Some of those questions you're just gonna be able to rattle right off, and that'll be great. And then you'll have some time at the end, most likely, that you can circle back and review those that you just, I didn't feel quite right about that. Let me have another look at it. Let me also see again what I might have encountered in the rest of the questions that maybe would help me think through the best answer for this. I've already mentioned this, but a common question type is, what should you do first? And probable answers are, you should engage in assessment, of course, and then you should, of course, address any ethical and legal issues. Again, this might be a situation where there are a couple of right answers, and you just want to make sure that you are not missing something: suicidal ideation, intimate partner violence. Is there anything that needs to be reported to Child Protective Services? Do you need to get paperwork in order to be able to see, a certain member of the family? Has everybody signed the consent form? Things of that nature. You always want to be pinging on those legal and ethical pieces first. Okay. We are going to develop a study plan, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then I'm going to transition to questions. And I think Hannah will help us, but if
Yes.
not, I'll do the, okay, great. You're here, Hannah?
Yep, I am here. I will help.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so developing a study plan. You need to identify when and where you plan to study, and you know yourself best, and you know if you need to study in silence, if you need to study with ambient music, if you need to study in the daytime, alone, or with all your buddies from the cohort. And all of that's great, and you know yourself best. So you need to determine what is the context that I'm going to get this studying done. You also know if you can study in little bites, so I can do 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, or no, I can't do that. I've got to block off an hour, or I can't do anything if I don't have 2 hours set aside. Okay, that's great. You just need to be able to identify that and set those boundaries, those exam boundaries for yourself, those study boundaries. Next, you'll want to decide how much time and energy that you need to spend on the topics with the most value to you. So again, looking through those domains, and some of you mentioned, oh, I'm a little wobbly on the diagnosis piece. I'm a little wobbly on the model, strategic, and there's a couple of strategics. There's MRI brief. So I'm a little uncertain. So you would recognize, I feel really great about the postmodern models, narrative, SFBT, collaborative, I've got those down. Then you would probably spend less time on those models, and you would probably look back at your materials for strategic, or you'd look back at your materials for your diagnosis class, or you would look up some materials and purchase those if you needed to. You would also want to analyze your resources and your budget. So how much money do you have to spend, if any? Are there materials that are kind of going around your cohort that people are borrowing, and maybe they're, paying for use materials? That's something to consider. And there, of course, the materials that TAMFT provides, and they typically provide some sort of a bundle or a discount. And so you do want to, watch the TMFT website to see, what they're offering and when those things might expire. I will say that it's important to know how you learn best. And it's graduate school. And so sometimes we don't have the luxury of doing things how we learn best. Sometimes it's like, I've got to get this done. I've got clients, let me just, buckle down and do it. And that's understandable. But you really want to give yourself, every best chance to do well on the exam. And so do you need to listen to things over and over again? Then perhaps you need to be listening. Maybe you need to be recording, yourself reading and then listening back to it. Maybe you do better just sort of reading, and maybe it needs to be quiet. Maybe you learn best by watching a webinar, a video. Maybe you learn best by making your own materials, which is what Dr. Goff usually talks about during this section. Dr. Goff made her own study sheets for each of the models: theorist, theory of change, theory of distress or dysfunction, common interventions, stages of therapy, who were the developers of the model. Boom, she was great. She had sheets for all of those, and that's how she did her studying, by actually typing those things up, looking at her primary source materials, and creating her own materials in that way. When I took the exam myself, there was some, if you can believe it, this is so dated, there were some CDs floating around my program that I borrowed from someone, and I would just go out to the pool and put the earbuds in, and I would just go to town and listen, and then I'd start over, and I'd just listen and start over. So again, identify the ways that you learn best, and then structure your studying time and your ambient in a way that's most beneficial to you. I will also say, before I stop for questions, I think we're doing okay on time. We have about 25 minutes left. It is helpful to, I just call it like a dry run, do a dry run of the day of the test. So there are 2 times that you would take the test. There's a morning, you could take it in the morning, you can take it in the afternoon. Again, know yourself. If you're someone that sleeps through 5 alarms, may not want to test in the morning. If you wake up just ready to conquer the world, probably the morning is what you'd want to do. So think through that and do a dry run. Leave from your condo, your house, your apartment, leave and drive over to the testing center during the exact time of day that you're going to be driving. Figure out where the parking is. Think through, read through the handbook on the amftrb.org website. See what you're allowed to, take in. See what you need. ID. Do I need anything else? I will tell you that you can't take in any food. You have a locker where you can check all your items in. You can't take earbuds. You can't take any kind of a device. I think you even have to leave your smartwatch in the locker. You can ask for headphones or earbuds to just create some silence for you. There will be other people taking, other exams. People take their medical boards in these places, which leads me to the story that I always tell in this section. You can't wear bulky clothes. So you can't wear a big puffy coat, and you're just going to need to maybe, a t-shirt and a sweat, something layered that if you get hot, you could step out and put in your locker. When I was testing, someone was taking their medical boards and they had smuggled in a textbook. And I mean, a textbook in their puffy coat. And they were hunched down looking in the textbook. So you can imagine the distraction, because of course I'm I want to see what's going on, but I've got my own exam to take. So that person was escorted out. Keep in mind, my time doesn't stop. My clock is still running down. So that's just kind of a lesson for all of you. If you're easily distractible, kind of put your head down, put those earbuds in, and try not to pay attention to what's going on around you. You can ask for pencil and paper. If it helps you to write things out, you can ask for a writing instrument and some paper. If you need to go to the bathroom or get a snack, your time doesn't stop. So you'd want to, really think through that, pop out, eat your granola, pop back in, and keep things going, because you won't be able to stop. And I think they have to keep eyes on you at all times. So you can't be sneaking in your phone, looking at your notes that you had or anything like that. So, okay, let me stop here. It looks like we're right at the 20-minute mark. I think we're okay there. Okay, so let me pause, and I'm happy to take those questions, Hannah, that might be in the Q&A.
Perfect. Okay, so we have one on what materials does the testing center typically provide? Paper, pencil, or something similar?
Yes. So again, the testing place, the Prometric testing place, they will provide that on request. So it's not just going to be right in it's kind of a cubicle setup. It's not going to be in your cube. You have to ask them for it when you get there.
Excellent. Okay. We have another question. In Domain 6, the ethical, legal, and professional standards, are the questions cut and dry, or are they written in a case scenario?
Yes, I'm trying to remember. My suggestion is that they will be both. It's possible they will be both. Yes, could be a knowledge. So in standard 3 of, the AMFT Code of Ethics, what do we know about this? And that would be more of a knowledge-based question, or it could be one of the other types where there is a kind of a vignette. So I would be prepared for both.
Excellent. We have another question on how should we approach this question when it doesn't explicitly tell us the theory of use?
Yeah. So here's my suggestion, going back to some of the slides. I would answer true, false to each of the answers. That would be the first thing I would do. And if I could eliminate anything, then I would know. And okay, so here's what I would do. I would answer true, false. Maybe let's say I eliminated A, then I have B, C, D. I'm still not feeling great about it, but I think it might be C. I click C, but I mark it to come back for later. Then I work all the way through maybe something generates inside of me as I'm reading something else, and I can go back and really feel good about C, or say, nope, I just don't think that's it. I'm just going to guess with B. And again, guessing is a strategy. If you just don't know it, guessing is a strategy. Don't leave it blank, because you could be leaving points on the table. Like, you could guess right. It's possible, especially if you've outright eliminated one that you know to be incorrect. So don't leave points on the table. You need to answer it. I hope that's helpful for whoever was asking.
I am looking. I don't see any more yet, but
we have, sorry to interrupt. We have 2 attendees with their hands up, and I am able to allow them to talk. So Heather Lewis, we're going to go to you first, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hello, I'm sorry, that was on accident.
Oh, that's okay. Brooke Becker, we'll go.
Brooke.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering, what is considered a passing score?
Brooke, it's a moving target. I can't tell you. No one can tell you. And that's because of the different forms and the different level of difficulty. So somebody might pass the exam 74, and somebody might pass the exam with 79. And there's no way to know.
And how long does it typically take to get your results back?
Generally speaking, it's about 4 weeks. This is for Texas people. Brooke, are you in Texas?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Generally speaking, about 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
It looks like we have another question as well. Regarding Texas Administrative Code, my program tested MFTs on many LPC standards. Will this be the same on our MFT test?
Okay, I'm gonna answer what I think you're asking. If not, whoever's asking, please come back and clarify for me. So because the test is a national test, except California students, then you're not going to be asked administrative code questions from Minnesota or Kentucky or Ohio. So we're talking global, and we're talking AMFT Code of Ethics. I hope that helps with the question.
Excellent.
Give me some feedback if not, whoever you are that asked the question.
I will let you know if
okay. Hannah, I did think of something to say if there's a moment between questions right now.
Yeah, but go ahead. You have time. Go ahead.
Okay. I thought of one more thing, and this is back to the participant who said at the beginning, like, I'm a little wobbly about diagnosis and application to theory and diagnosis. So you may know, if you're if you're toward the end of your program, the DSM-5 just came out in March, and I cannot say for sure one way or the other when those DSM-5 questions will enter into the test bank. So I would love to say it makes intuitive sense that no, you won't have those questions, but I can't say for sure. So it might be helpful to do a run through and just, kind of not read, but, just heavily scan and kind of get a sense of it. That might be helpful to you. And maybe your program director, your faculty will be able to, help you with that as well. But that's just something I wanted to put on your radar in case you've already had that class and you're, not really thinking about that.
Excellent. That's an excellent point.
Okay.
No, yeah, I forgot about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Another question we have is, what is the earliest one can take the test? For example, do you need to have completed their MFT program like for Texas?
So great question. So I don't have my Texas rules pulled up, but for students at COAMFT programs, you can take the exam in your last semester of enrollment of your graduate program. I know that for sure. If you're in a program that's not COAMFT accredited, check the MFT rules. I should know it, but I just don't keep it in my brain if I can easily look it up. So there's the answer. COAMFT, you can take it prior to graduation. If not, check the rules to be sure in Texas. And that's fairly common. among other states. Ohio is the same. If you're from a co-empty program, you can submit a letter to the board that says, hey, I'm still a student, but I want to take it, and they'll permit that. So it's the short answer though is it's up to the board. It's what the board rules say.
Absolutely. Another question is, it may be very similar. If this attendee has another maybe thing to add on to it, they can ask, what are the requirements to apply to take the exam?
Yes, so I think the Texas rules say, so if you're at a co-empty program, that you have to be in the last term of enrollment, I think is the language from the board rules. It used to be the last term of internship, but I think it's the last term of enrollment. So essentially, you need to be like almost done. Maybe you've got 3, 6, 9 hours left, but you're very, very near to the end, which makes sense because you want to have as much content learned and covered before you walk in to take the exam, which is something else that this is my personal recommendation. And I think Dr. Goff has shares my sentiments on this, that we recommend taking it while the knowledge is fresh. So maybe you have comprehensive exams in your program, maybe there's a clinical presentation, you're in it, you're living it, you're talking about it with your colleagues, you're in the intern room and everybody's dialoguing, it's fresh. My best advice is take it while it's hot in your brain, and don't wait until you're 4 or 5 or 6 months out thinking, oh, I'll retain it, because it's hard and you're inundated with it now. And it's a great time to really just capitalize on what you've learned.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Another anonymous question is there any study bundles or study books that you recommend?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. So the TMFT has licensed the materials that Dr. Goff and I have created. So there are several things. I'll list them off, and then I'm going to direct you to the tmft.org website because the list and the bundles are there. So we have a 16-hour webinar. In the webinar, you get the slide deck that we use. And of course, you get Dr. Goff and I talking through the models, talking through ethics, talking through family supportive theory. So like feminist family theory, family life cycle, sex therapy. And then we're talking through the models. So we're doing Gottman, we're doing EFT, structural, MRI brief, all through the list, about 30-minute chunks at a time. We have that. We have the glossary. So this is a list of, I'm going to call it jargon or vocab for each of those sections. And then lastly, we have the practice exam. These are questions that Dr. Goff and I have created. There are answers and there are explanations for why that answer is the correct answer. And what we've heard, what Dr. Goff and I have heard anecdotally, is that our questions have our applicants or candidates have felt well prepared for taking the exam. So our questions are rigorous. They are tricky at times. We're thrown in that always or that terminal language because that's something that you may encounter, and we want to prepare you for that. So those are the 3 things, and I'll direct you back to tmft.org. I think it's students, or for students is the tab. Is that right, Hannah?
Yes, it should be for students in the top right-hand corner. Mm-hmm.
And then you drop down, there's a little pick list, and I think it's exam prep materials is where you can find that information.
I have also included the link for anybody in the chat if you can see it for the National Exam Prep link. If anybody can't see it, just let me know. I have a couple more questions for you if you have time.
Yes.
Excellent. One of them is, do you know if students from KCREP accredited programs can take the exam at the end of the internship too, but before graduation?
I don't know about KCREP, but that will be in the rules very clearly in the MFT board rules for Texas. That will be there very clearly, whether you can or cannot. My sense is that you can't, but check the rules to be sure.
Good. Okay. Another question is, I have purchased the 16-hour webinar, but have not been able to access it. How can she access it after she logs in?
Okay, Hannah,
Yes.
I'm going to defer. I don't know my sense is that maybe there's a login or a passcode or something, but I'm sorry to whoever's asking. I don't know the details, but that is a TAMFT question. If you're having difficulty, please reach out immediately and they will make it right.
Absolutely. Please reach out to TAMFT. You should be able to direct chat TAMFT, and we will get that fixed for you. Let's see. Another question is, if we are early in the MFT program, would it be best to wait to purchase the exam prep materials? Does it update regularly?
I would say wait. That would be my advice. Because here's the other thing. What if you get to the end of the program and you think, I'm feeling pretty good about this. I might not want to spend X. I might just want to spend Y. And then you're already out the money. So if finances are an issue, you might want to wait and see what you're exposed to throughout the program, what lands easier for you to absorb and what you might need to study, a little bit more. We just released the materials during the pandemic. It's terrible timing, but that's just when it happened. So the materials are just about 2 years old, if my memory is serving, and we have not done an update yet, but we haven't needed to do an update. Really, the DSM is the only thing that, coming down the pike, we'll need to address that at some point. So I'm going to call the material current, and, Gottman is Gottman, structural is structural. There's going to be some, a little bit of research here and there, but the tenets, the interventions are going to remain the same. So I feel really confident in that material.
Excellent. Also to follow up, thank you, Jose, for answering in the chat. KCREP does apparently, is what he's saying, allow for a letter of good standing from your university and a few other requirements.
Thank you, Jose. Thanks for that. Okay.
And then an anonymous attendee asked, do you know of any accommodation for people whose second language is English?
There is a section in the candidate handbook, amft.org. That's where you would find the candidate handbook. There is a section on how to apply for accommodations. And I believe some of those accommodations would be a site limitation, as well as someone who speaks a language other than English as their first language. So make sure, and this might be a situation where you would want to add a little bit of time to when you were planning to take it, meaning if you wanted to apply for accommodation, I don't know how quickly that turnaround happens. So if you're thinking, I want to test in July, read up and find out, because it might be more feasible that you want to test in August, just, to see how things pan out.
Absolutely. We have another question from one of the Megans. Is Gottman on the exam?
Gottman is listed in that candidate handbook. At the very end, there's a list of knowledge statements. And I'm gonna botch it. This is not what it is, but it's sort of close. Like theories of, marital functioning, theories of couple functioning, theories of couple distress. And Gottman has a lot to say about couple functioning and couple distress. So while the handbook might not say Gottman, he's a prolific researcher in the field. And so I would, and we covered in the webinar. So I would say, yes, that's something you would want to know.
Okay. Is there a lot of changes on the DSM-5 TR to where using the older version of the DSM-5 would be adverse to treatment and knowledge necessary for the exam?
My sense is the changes are minimal. I don't teach that class in my program, so I can't speak with definitive authority, but what I've read, and I actually I have mine right here to do some work in. My sense is that it's minimal. I can't say with any authority though when the test bank is going to be infused with those TR questions. I'm sorry, I wish I could. And I have been monitoring the AMFTRE website to see if there is any language about when we might expect these questions. So I think if you have a solid understanding of DSM-5, my sense is you'll be pretty well prepared for, taking the exam right now. If you were going to wait and take it in a year, that I would be hedging myself a lot more and say, no, by that time, I really think you need to be in the 5TR.
Absolutely. We have a response for the accommodations. We've got multiple people saying it takes about 8 weeks to process.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to those of you that responded. So that's good. So add a couple of months to that exam window that you're preparing for. That's great.
Excellent. Making sure I didn't miss any other questions.
I'm seeing about 4 minutes left before we're.
Yes, we've got about 4. I don't see a whole lot. If anybody has any last minute questions. Okay, I will end it right about now. Thank you everyone so much for coming today. If you enjoyed our webinar, visit TAMFT's website to see the other courses and free CEUs that are available through the website.
Thanks so much for coming, everyone. I wish you well in your study efforts. Take good care.
Thank you.